Hello everyone and welcome back to another video where the Professor Z complains about an anime cutting too much content from the source material, aka Overlord Season 4 Episode 10 review. There's a lot to cover in this episode, so let's get right into it. So we start off this episode exactly where we left off, as Ainz has everything under control. And by that I mean he has absolutely no idea what's going on. The power suit that killed the Death Knight and the Death Warrior was definitely from Yggdrasil, but who was within the armor is unknown. Luckily, Ainz is able to play things off like he has everything under control. Luckier still, Cocytus and Shaltir. By the way, this scene is freaking adorable. This is really just Shaltir's world and we're all living in it. Her adorableness aside, Shaltir deduces that Ainz intentionally sent a smaller force than necessary in order to draw out this armored enemy. Albedo continuing this topic by deducing that the armor is most likely from the Team Red Drop, since their intel shows that they worked outside of the northern part of the kingdom. So we're getting into our first bit of cut content here from this episode, that being the specific capabilities of the power suit. The power suit is not an item that initially existed within Yggdrasil, but instead was introduced to the game as a free item for new players in a later update. Despite it being a free item, the suit is quite powerful, mainly because it was meant to help newer players grind levels. The suit itself is very customizable, with various aspects of it being able to be swapped in and out. Some of the basic functions include high-speed flight, underwater capabilities for up to an hour, magic launchers in the shoulders, which are restricted to non-enhanced spells and have limited uses, and the suit's attack and defense, both physical and magical, are quite high independent of the user's stats. The armor has two main weaknesses though. The first is that outside jewelry and other decorative equipment, no extra armor can be equipped while wearing it. The second issue is that the armor does not affect your HP or MP. So if you're weak, you may have a hard exterior, but if someone were to pierce the armor, your squishy insides would still take lots of damage. As an example, the Guardians would have no issue beating it, but the Pleiades wouldn't stand a chance since higher end power suits have capabilities equivalent to level 80 characters. With that info out of the way, Demiurge proposes that they send further troops to re-attack the village. And while Ainz would like to do that, he decides against it in order to abide by his promise he made to Pistonio and Negretto. Instead, Nazarick would change course and attack the capital immediately. Of course, this doesn't save the other villages, they're all equally screwed. So there is an intermission from the light novel missing here, but in all honesty it's not that important. In short, we learned a little bit about the structure of the City-State Alliance, mainly that it's comprised of 12 cities, and that a tournament, kinda like the Olympics, is held there every 4 years. Overall, it's not that important, and it's understandable why it was cut. Now, the following scene is heavily played down. In the light novel, Zanuck is practically swimming in work and is pretty much burnt out. Sadly though, we don't really see that in the anime. Moving on from that though, we find Zanuck working when he's interrupted by Renier's arrival. Though he tries to reject Renier, her threats of spreading false rumors about him forces Zanuck's hand. However, he requests that Climb and Brain wait outside. The first thing Renier asks of Zanuck is understandable, since he's doing his father's work, and that is if their father is even still alive. He is, but Zanuck has essentially placed him under house arrest thanks to the help of the heads of military and internal affairs. Ramposa wished to continue negotiations despite it clearly being pointless since the Sorcerer's Kingdom has been wiping out villages since their declaration of war. The only reason they had realized that the Sorcerer's Kingdom was attacking in the first place was because Nerar had sent word that they had repelled the Sorcerer's Kingdom's attack. Now that they're aware of it, however, they need to figure out how the Sorcerer's Kingdom's attacks went unnoticed up until this point. Well, we finally find out one of the nobles that the Sorcerer's Kingdom recruited, that noble being Marquis Raven. While Zanuck does not want to accept this, since they had been friends in the past, the evidence makes it obvious. There isn't another noble with enough power to silence people on such a large scale. Worse still is that they lack the manpower to take action against him, since the Sorcerer's Kingdom will soon be knocking on their door. Zanuck has already requested assistance from the other nobles, and will use the Sorcerer's Kingdom's massacres as propaganda to get the normal citizens to fight as well. Zanuck's actions have impressed Renier as she comments about Zanuck finally becoming a proper king. In reality, if Zanuck wasn't the last member of the royal family to handle this situation, he'd flee, but he's willing to take a stand as king. Finally, Zanuck tells Renier to flee to the council state, as their father had planned for them, with Renier replying simply that she will when the time comes. Now, before we start discussing the adventures of Blue Rose, there is a tad bit of context missing here. This short scene here is an introduction of the draft that is now affecting the kingdom. Every capable man has been called to arms, and those who can't flee pretty much have no other option but to hide and hope they survive the upcoming battle. Now on to Blue Rose. They are on their way to meet with an unknown client who has hired both Blue Rose and Red Drop. Lacheus, however, isn't too thrilled about this since she knows what kind of person her uncle can be. However, the presence of Lacheus' uncle only increases the members of Blue Rose's interest. No matter what Lacheus says, she can't deny the fact that this request is suspect and the group should stick together for it. After arriving at the shady building, the group are pointed to room 301, where Azith has already arrived. Upon arriving, Lacheus barely has a moment to open the door before she slams it shut. Turning around to her friends, Lacheus warns them of her uncle being an odd person before she turns and opens the door. Upon entering, the group meets Azith and two scantily clad women, who are far more clothed in the anime than they are described in the light novel. Azith doesn't seem to care though, as he just continues on doing what he's doing. Luckily, Evil Eye uses Charm Person to send the women off to an adjacent room. After this, there is a short conversation between Lacheus and Azith in the light novel. The conversation covers how Azith does not plan on fighting Ainz, while Lacheus fully intends to stand and fight. This conversation is interrupted, however, as three individuals enter the room, each of them individually stronger than Blue Rose. And yes, this is Clementine's brother. We then learn the reason for this meeting, and that is for the Theocracy to recruit both of the kingdom's Adamantite teams. Just as a note, the Theocracy has also recruited various other adventuring teams before the Sorcerer's Kingdom's attack. Azith asks which country the group is from, which receives a response from a large-hatted girl, which is quickly snuffed out by an assassin that appears out of nowhere. Azith then reveals that he knew who these individuals were all along. They're from the Theocracy's secret unit, the Black Scripture. Azith singling out the Barbarian as someone stronger than the rest. However, the Barbarian turns to Evil Eye, stating that she's as strong, if not stronger than him. Azith then asks the Black Scripture members to fight with them, which is more of a joking way to reject the Scripture's offer than an actual offer from himself. Blue Rose also rejects the Scripture's offer. Now, before the Scripture leaves, there is something of interest that happens, and yes, it was cut. Azith asks the Black Scripture if someone by the name of Rufus is doing well. Clementine's brother asks if he could be more specific, since a name is little to go off of. And be more specific he is. I'll read you what he says exactly. "Ah, is that so? I suppose it's only natural for people of your rank to not know him by name after all. So how do you guys usually address that undead? Milord or something?" Now, understandably, the Black Scripture doesn't take kindly to the fact that someone knows their secrets, but Clementine's brother stops the others from killing Azith on the spot, stating that they'll report this information to their superiors. The Black Scripture then leaves shortly after. Things then play out just as they do in the anime. Azith tells Blue Rose to get out of Dodge, Lacheus refuses, and Azith goes to smash. We then move to the final stage of this episode as the kingdom's army of over 400,000 people gathers to face off against the Sorcerer's Kingdom's army of over 10,000. Zanuck rides out by himself in order to request a final meeting with the Sorcerer King. Inside Ainz's tent, Albedo voices her rejection of Zanuck's proposal for a final talk, while Cocytus believes that rejecting Zanuck would reflect negatively on Ainz's reputation. And while negativity spread by people about to die is pointless, the chances of those listening via magic could not be ruled out. So Ainz goes to meet Zanuck face to face. After greeting each other, Ainz creates a table and chairs via magic, and also brings out 2 glasses and fills them with water. The discussions then begin, and to Ainz's surprise, the first thing Zanuck asks is why Ainz would do something so cruel. The answer is simple, of course. By sacrificing the kingdom, the world will know that opposing the Sorcerer's Kingdom is pointless. This answer to Zanuck is too close-minded, since there are definitely ways of achieving this goal without mass genocide. At this point, Ainz decides to shed his act as the Sorcerer's King and speak for himself. Now that Ainz has come to terms with the fact that his past friends are most likely not coming back, his goals have changed, and all he wants now is happiness, not so much for himself, but but for the NPCs that his friends left behind. And though this is hard for Zanuck to accept at first, he soon understands Ainz' reasoning. Ainz then asks Zanuck about the whereabouts of Gaziv's sword, since Zanuck is wearing Gaziv's armor. The sword still being in Brain's possession, who is not present within the army since technically he's under Renier's employ. With the end of these discussions, Zanuck downs the water Ainz gave to him, which could have been poisoned for all we know, but he drinks it knowing full well that Ainz didn't need to resort to poison in order to kill him. Returning to their horses, Zanuck asks one more question of Ainz, that being if he or one of his subordinates had killed Zanuck's brother. And while Ainz doesn't remember specifics, he does remember that it happened. Knowing this is a load off Zanuck's mind as he turns to return to his army. And while Ainz' respect for Zanuck as a true king grows, Zanuck questions if he was ever good enough to really be king in the first place. Returning to the kingdom's side, Zanuck is met by what's pretty much the bottom of the barrel when it comes to the nobles that had joined this battle. They of course were hoping for a surrender, but if that was gonna happen, it would have happened already. Entering his tent, Zanuck is met by the Minister of Military Affairs, who starts by asking about Ainz and the talks they had. To the minister's surprise, Zanuck describes Ainz as far more human than you'd expect, and in an alternate world, maybe Zanuck and Ainz could have been friends. But sadly, that's not the world we live in. Suddenly, the bottom of the barrel barge into Zanuck's tent, and they seek Zanuck's head in hopes that it'll sway Ainz' decision to spare them. Zanuck, however, standing as a member of the royal family and the last king, takes up his sword in defiance. With the Minister of Military Affairs by his side, the two of them face off against several soldiers bought off by the nobles. Sadly though, as we would soon see, the nobles were able to overpower and take Zanuck's life. Presenting Zanuck's head to Ainz, he's not as happy as you would expect. In fact, Ainz requests that Zanuck receive a proper burial before sending the nobles and their families off to a fate worse than death. Yeah, Neuronist is Nazarik's torture master, and under Ainz' order will most certainly make these nobles suffer. And with that, Ainz orders Cocytus and Mare to begin the complete eradication of the capital. So, do I even need to say anymore? There's plenty of missing, none of it is majorly significant, but its absence damages the overall narrative. At this point, I feel like that pretty much just sums up this entire season. Though, I suppose that if you're an anime only, this is all still fun Overlord content, and all the more power to you, I suppose. But for now, that's all for me. Remember to like the video if you enjoyed it, sub for more going forward, and let me know what you thought of episode 10 down below. As always though, this has been the Professor Z, and I will see you all next time.